My son tossed my life's treasures into the garbage, and his wife smirked. "You're no longer required here. Leave now." I stood amid my shattered recollections, grinned, and placed a single call. 4 days later, they were desperately hunting for me. With 82 missed calls, they believed they had wiped me out. But they were mistaken. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and comment what time it is where you are right now. The first detail I spotted was not the house. It was the heap. My old truck sputtered to a halt in front of what once felt like home, and there it sat. A mound of items strewn beside the dumpster like forgotten waste. Cardboard containers ripped apart, their insides spilling onto the asphalt in a disorder I could not fully grasp. Those are my belongings. The realization struck before I even shut off the motor. My hands clung to the steering wheel, knuckles pale against the faded leather. 4 days of angling at Lake Tahoe had left me weary but serene. That serenity vanished like dawn fog. I stepped out gradually, my joints aching from the lengthy drive. The mild June afternoon brought the scent of rain and something more. The stale aroma of garments left outdoors too long. My sturdy boots crunched on pebbles as I neared the heap, each stride growing weightier. There, partly concealed under a jumble of autumn jackets, was the photograph, our marriage picture from 40 years ago. The glass fractured diagonally across Evelyn's face, her grin divided by a ragged split. Dust adhered to the golden frame I had shined just last month. Someone erred. This must be an error. But the proof accumulated. My milestone watch, the one Evelyn had scrimped 4 months to purchase for me, rested face down in a pool, its lens broken, the strap saturated, likely destroyed. I lifted it with trembling digits, water trickling between my fingers. My angling equipment lay dispersed everywhere. Bait cases cracked open, hooks and weights mingling with dining tools and aged snapshots. The pole I had wielded for 25 years rested broken in two, its rings ripped off like damaged fangs. Someone had discarded my whole existence onto the road, with the same regard they would offer real refuse. The containers narrated their tale, hurriedly stuffed, roughly managed, frayed at the edges where they had been pulled or fallen. My name remained visible on one flank, inscribed in Evelyn's precise script from our previous relocation. The pigment had smeared in the moist atmosphere, rendering my own name resemble a blurred error. I discovered my labor shirts in a pile, the ones I had donned to the plant for 35 years, grease marks and all. They had belonged to me. Now they rested creased and soiled, stepped on by whoever had dragged them out here. My reinforced boots, the fine pair I reserved for services and events, perched inverted with dirt embedded in the soles. What on earth occurred here? The query seared in my chest as I lingered encircled by the remnants of my life. Neighbors' windows stayed dim despite the disturbance. No one emerged to clarify or assist. The whole avenue felt empty, as if all were holding their breath, awaiting my vanishing. My phone vibrated against my side. For an instant, optimism surged. Perhaps Ethan calling to elucidate. Perhaps a municipal official stating an oversight. But it was merely a message from the tackle store verifying my purchase from earlier. The ordinary world persisted while mine crumbled. I reached down and raised Evelyn's ornament case, its timber exterior marred and one edge indented. The plush interior had detached, and her scant valuable items were scattered in the soil. Her mother's band, the one she intended to bequeath to Ethan's future offspring. Now it was covered in filth, resting beside a lid and tobacco ends. The truth enveloped me like a chilly mist. This was not arbitrary. This was no blunder. Someone had intentionally bundled everything I possessed and discarded it like rubbish. Someone had chosen to ruin 40 years of meticulous safeguarding, 40 years of remembrances, 40 years of constructing a life. I straightened, my spine throbbing from stooping over the dispersed items. The house towered before me, its panes shadowy and hostile. I required explanations. I needed to comprehend why my complete being now adorned the avenue like a failed garage sale. Time to uncover what is truly happening here. I advanced toward the entry, stepping over additional strewn documents and shattered image holders. Each footfall felt intentional now, resolute. Someone would account for this disorder, and they would do it immediately. The key inserted into the mechanism rotated partially, then halted abruptly. I attempted again, exerting more force, jiggling the metal to and fro as I had done countless times. Nothing. The lock resisted as firmly as if I were trying to access a secure vault with a dull blade. They altered the locks. They genuinely changed the locks on my own residence. My hands trembled now, complicating the key's manipulation. I extracted it and inspected it closely, as if the alloy might have altered during my angling excursion. Identical worn borders, identical scratches I had committed to memory over the years. The lock differed, not the key. I groped for my phone, navigating contacts with awkward fingers. Ethan first. He would clarify this confusion, resolve everything. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before switching to voicemail, his tone cheerful and recorded. "You have reached Ethan Tinsley. Leave a message and I will return your call." "Ethan, it is Dad. I just returned from angling and all my items are on the avenue. The locks are changed. What is occurring? Call me back immediately." I tried Brooke next, though conversing with my daughter-in-law always resembled navigating a hazard zone. Same outcome. Directly to voicemail. Her message briefer, sharper. You know what to do. Standing there on my own front veranda, barred like an outsider. I felt something frigid settle in my gut. This was not a simple mix-up or urgent fix. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had bided time until I departed the area, then methodically eliminated me from the location I had deemed home for 10 years. The afternoon shadows lengthened, and the spring breeze carried a chill absent an hour prior. I crossed the lawns to Harold's residence, my neighbor of 9 years. If anyone knew what transpired, it would be him. The fellow observed everything. Which periodicals residents perused, when they departed for employment, who visited when. I rapped on his door. 3 firm knocks that resounded in the silent avenue. Footsteps neared, wary and calculated. The door parted just sufficiently for Harold's aged visage to emerge, his eyes glancing past me toward my scattered possessions. "Harold, do you know what happened here? All my stuff is on the avenue, and I cannot enter my house." His demeanor shifted, uneasy and elusive. "Sorry. Weston, I have not noticed anything odd. Perhaps some sort of mistake." Mistake, I motioned toward the heap of my possessions. That is 40 years of my life beside the garbage. Someone changed my locks while I was gone angling. You must have seen something. Harold's gaze shifted away, concentrating on something beyond my shoulder. I have been occupied with my yard. Did not really attend to what was occurring over there. The falsehood lingered between us like haze. Harold had been retired for 7 years and spent most days stationed at his front window, monitoring the community like a guard. He knew precisely what had happened, but he was not going to inform me. "Look, if you need a place to make calls or wait for your kin, you are welcome to. Thanks, but I will handle it." He nodded swiftly, evidently relieved. Well, I hope you resolve it. The door shut with a gentle snap, leaving me solitary on his veranda. Even Harold, who had borrowed my implements and shared drinks on summer nights, was abandoning me. Whatever had transpired here, the entire community was involved, or too frightened to engage. I returned to my belongings, each step heavier than before. The heap appeared even more pitiful in the dimming light, like the remains of someone's whole existence displayed for the world to view. I located an old patio seat among the wreckage, metal frame bent but still usable, and positioned it beside the biggest container. My phone displayed no fresh messages. I attempted Ethan again, then Brooke. Both calls went straight to voicemail without ringing this time. Either their devices were off, or they were intentionally evading me, given the evidence around me. I wagered on the latter. The avenue grew quieter as mealtime neared. Other homes showed signs of activity, lights activating, garage entrances opening as folks returned from jobs. But nobody paused to inquire if I needed aid or wondered why an older man sat among refuse sacks full of items. They all seemed to know something I did not. I settled deeper into the seat, drawing my coat tighter against the cooling breeze. Whatever scheme was unfolding here, I was evidently the only one unaware of the guidelines. But I had acquired patience in 68 years of living, and determination in 35 years of plant labor. I could wait. They would have to return home eventually, and when they did, I would obtain my answers. The sky began to tint violet at the borders, and street lamps started flickering on one by one. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. But I was not departing. Not until someone explained why my entire life had been discarded like yesterday's waste. I had no other place to go anyway. 5 hours elapsed like a gradual drain. I had organized most of my belongings by the time their vehicle pulled into the driveway. Some items were recoverable, garments that could be laundered, volumes that had only become moist. Other things were damaged irreparably, victims of their rushed removal. The Toyota Camry's beams swept across the heap as Brooke parked, lighting the disarray like a crime site. I rose from the patio seat, my joints protesting after hours in the cool air. Relief surged through me despite all. Finally, someone who could explain this ordeal. Ethan exited the passenger side, his actions cautious and intentional. He appeared older than his 45 years. Shoulders drooped under the burden of something I could not pinpoint. Brooke stepped from the driver's side with her typical brisk competence, her auburn hair impeccable despite the extended day. Ethan, Brooke, thank goodness you are here. I walked toward them, indicating the scattered belongings. What happened? Why are my things on the avenue? I cannot enter the house. Someone changed the locks while I was angling. Brooke did not slow her pace, passing me as if I were unseen. She retrieved shopping sacks from the rear with sharp, furious motions. When she finally regarded me, her expression was icy enough to solidify liquid. Because you are no longer required here. Weston. The words struck me like a physical impact. I actually retreated a step, blinking in bewilderment. What do you mean not required? This is my home. I reside here. Resided. She amended, slamming the rear shut. Past tense. The loan is settled now. Your role here is complete. Take your clutter and leave. My role. The term made no sense. Brooke, I do not comprehend what you are discussing. This is my residence. I have been paying the loan for exactly. Her grin was as keen as shattered crystal. You settled it. Task fulfilled. We do not need you anymore. I turned to Ethan, frantic for reason in this insanity. Son, what is she referring to? Tell me what is going on here. Ethan could not meet my gaze. He stared at the ground, his hands thrust deep in his pockets like a remorseful youngster. "Sorry, Dad," he muttered, scarcely audible. We attempted to make it function, but what I reached toward him, and he actually recoiled from my contact. "Ethan, look at me. I am your father. I have lived in this residence for 10 years. I cover the food, the services, the fixes. This is my home." Brooke laughed, a noise like fracturing pottery. "Your home, you were a renter. Weston, a very handy renter who paid all our expenses and requested nothing in exchange. But renters can be removed when they are no longer suitable." The harshness stole my breath. I glanced between them, my son avoiding my eyes, my daughter-in-law smiling with clear contentment. The avenue light cast severe shadows across their faces, making them resemble strangers. "I assisted you in acquiring this residence," I said slowly, each word deliberately gauged. "When you could not qualify for the loan, I co-signed. When you could not make the installments, I covered them. When you needed a deposit for Ethan's vehicle, I provided my reserves. Everything I had, I gave to this kin, and we are thankful," Brooke stated with feigned earnestness. "Truly, we are, but thankfulness does not mean we must shelter you eternally. You are elderly. Weston, you occupy space. You drag dirt through my tidy residence. You leave plates in the basin and view television too loudly. We want our existence back." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but uttered nothing. My own son, standing there while his wife dismantled our bond with precise accuracy. The lad I had taught to cycle, aided with assignments, backed through university, reduced to a mute partner in my banishment. "Where am I supposed to go?" The query emerged smaller than I planned, laced with a fragility that made me despise myself. "That is not our issue anymore." Brooke headed toward the front entrance, shopping sacks in hand. "You are an adult. Figure it out." "Ethan." I attempted one final time, infusing every bit of fatherly command into his name. "Look at me, son." He lifted his eyes for merely a moment, and what I saw there was worse than animosity. It was void, utter blank apathy, as if I were already gone to him. "The locks are altered," Brooke called over her shoulder. "Do not try to enter. I will summon the authorities if necessary." The front entrance opened and closed, leaving me solitary under the avenue light with my scattered possessions. The veranda light activated, then promptly deactivated again, a distinct signal that I was not welcome, even near the entryway. I stood there for a prolonged moment, absorbing what had just transpired. 40 years of parenthood erased, 10 years of benevolence forgotten, a lifetime of affection and sacrifice, dismissed like an inconvenient expense. But beneath the pain, something else was emerging, something firmer and colder than the evening air. They thought they could exhaust me and discard me like waste. They thought they could seize everything I had labored for and then bar me from my own existence. They were about to discover how incorrect they were. The entrance snapped shut with a conclusiveness that reverberated through my frame. I stood there, immobilized on the walkway, gazing at the residence that had been my home for 10 years. The veranda light darkened again, leaving me in the amber radiance of the avenue light. 7 years. 7 years since that discussion in the kitchen, when Ethan had looked me in the eyes and vowed we would always be kin. His voice returned to me, younger and brimming with aspiration. "Dad, if you assist us with the loan, we will always be united. This is our kin home now." I could envision him so vividly in my recollection. leaning against the counter with that sincere look he had inherited from his mother. Brooke had been there too, her hair longer then, her smile kinder. Or perhaps it had merely seemed kinder because I had desired to believe it. "You will always have a place with us, Mr. Tinsley," she had said, using my formal title as she always did back then. "We want you to feel like this is your spot too." How innocent I had been. How eager to believe that my son still required me, still desired me nearby. Evelyn had been departed 3 years by then, and the residence felt too vacant, too still. When Ethan called about their loan difficulties, I seized the opportunity to aid, not just with funds, but with belonging someplace again. "Kin cares for kin," I told them, endorsing the documents that made me accountable for their obligation. "Of course, I will assist." Ethan had embraced me that day. Genuinely embraced me. Something he had not done since his adolescent years. "I promise. Dad, you will never regret this. Never regret this." The words tasted acrid now. I reflected on the gradual shifts, how the initial few years had been positive. Kin meals, holiday festivities, Ethan seeking my counsel on job issues. I had felt valuable, essential. But somewhere around 2021, things started altering. Invites to meals became rarer. Discussions grew briefer. My views were rejected more swiftly. By 2024, I was consuming most meals alone in my chamber. Brooke would exhale when I used the kitchen, as if my presence was a bother she scarcely endured. Ethan ceased requesting advice and began gazing through me instead of at me. They developed a code of glances and subtle cues that excluded me entirely. But I had convinced myself it was fleeting tension. Ethan's employment, Brooke's dispositions, the usual fluctuations of kin life. I had created excuses for them the way guardians do, finding justifications for conduct that grew increasingly distant and rejecting. The pattern was evident now, seen from this side of treachery. The nearer we approached settling the loan, the worse they treated me, as if my utility had a termination date linked directly to the balance. Every installment I made toward their obligation was one step closer to my removal. They had been scheming this, perhaps not from the start, but certainly for months. You do not change locks impulsively. You do not pack someone's whole life into containers without planning. This had been deliberate, systematic, timed flawlessly for my angling trip. 7 years of loan installments, 7 years of purchasing provisions, paying services, covering repairs. 7 years of believing I was investing in kin when I was actually financing my own disposal. The avenue was silent, except for the remote hum of interstate traffic. Other residences displayed signs of normal kin life, screens flickering behind drapes, veranda lights greeting people home. But nobody appeared to check on the older man standing among refuse sacks full of belongings. Even in the suburbs, people attended to their own affairs when it came to kin conflict. I drew my coat tighter against the evening chill. Lingering here, pitying myself, would alter nothing. Ethan had made his choice, and it was not me. Brooke had triumphed in whatever contest she had been playing all these years. They had obtained what they desired, a cleared residence and liberation from the bother of thankfulness. But they had committed one vital miscalculation in their estimates. They had presumed I was helpless, that an older man with no destination would simply fade quietly into whatever support systems existed for rejected parents. They treated me as if I were already departed, merely a load awaiting interment. Time to demonstrate how incorrect they were. I turned from the residence and walked back toward my scattered belongings, my footsteps steady and determined. The heap appeared different now, not like waste, but like proof. I approached my dispersed possessions with a technician's perspective, evaluating what could be rescued and what merited abandonment. 35 years of plant labor had taught me to think methodically, to resolve issues through careful examination rather than emotional response. This was just another issue demanding a practical resolution. The marriage photo went into the cab of my truck first, fractured glass and all. Some things were worth maintaining despite harm. Evelyn's ornament case followed, along with the few pieces of her mother's imitation jewels that had endured Brooke's rushed packing, not precious to others, but invaluable to me. My labor tools were scattered among the garments and domestic items. The wrench collection I had owned for 35 years, still in ideal condition. The gauge that had helped me construct Ethan's playhouse when he was 9. These tools held worth beyond emotion. They represented abilities and competencies that Ethan and Brooke had forgotten I held. I loaded them carefully into the truck bed, each tool and driver finding its correct spot in the kit. Order mattered. Readiness mattered. If I was going to reconstruct my life from nothing at 68, I would need every edge I could assemble. The garments were a mixed boon. Most of my labor shirts had survived whole, along with several pairs of pants and my winter overcoat. The dress attire was ruined. The outfit I had worn to Evelyn's burial was stained and wrinkled beyond salvage, but I would not need formal attire for what followed. A vehicle slowed as it passed, the operator craning his neck to stare at the older man loading waste into a pickup. I met his gaze steadily until he averted and drove on. Let them gawk. Let the entire community witness what Ethan and Brooke had done. Disgrace was a tool that cut in both directions. My angling gear had suffered damage, but most was recoverable. The snapped pole could be substituted, and the bait cases just needed rearranging. Angling had always been my retreat, my time to think lucidly without disruption. I would need that lucidity in the coming weeks. Papers and records were strewn like foliage after a gale. I gathered them systematically. Coverage policies, account summaries, revenue filings, vital data that Ethan and Brooke had discarded as carelessly as everything else. Did they think I existed only within the walls of their residence? Did they imagine I had no monetary life beyond settling their accounts? That was their second vital error. They knew I had reserves. They had seen me issue checks for their costs year after year, but they had never troubled to learn the full scope of my assets. To them, I was just a handy source of monthly installments, not a man who had labored steadily for 40 years and lived modestly. The milestone watch was irreparable, its lens shattered, and mechanism flooded. I held it for a moment, recalling Evelyn's pride when she presented it to me, wrapped in newsprint because we could not afford elaborate wrapping then. Then I dropped it into one of the harmed containers I was abandoning. Some emblems of the past needed to remain interred. Harold's residence remained shadowy, though I could see the faint glow of a screen through his living room blinds, probably observing me through a slit in the shades, recording details he could share with other neighbors tomorrow. The whole avenue would know about Ethan's ungratefulness by dawn. Though none would intervene, suburban courtesy had its boundaries. 45 years I had labored to sustain this kin. First Evelyn and young Ethan, when funds were scarce and plant positions were unstable. Then just Ethan through his teenage phase, university fees, and early career challenges. Finally, Ethan and Brooke, aiding them attain the middle-class steadiness I had never quite achieved for myself. Time for a yield on that investment. The truck bed was almost full now, packed with everything that counted. I would have to abandon some furnishings. The cabinet Evelyn had restored, the lounger where I viewed television most evenings. But material items were merely encumbrance now. I required mobility, adaptability, liberty to act without hindrance. I took one final survey of the debris area that had been my life 3 hours ago. Astonishing how swiftly 40 years could be condensed to what fit in a pickup. But condensation also meant refinement, retaining only what was vital, worthwhile, significant. Ethan and Brooke thought they had succeeded by discarding me. They thought removing me from their residence would remove me from their existences. They had underestimated the distinction between disposing of someone and truly eliminating them. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the ignition. The motor started instantly, dependable equipment responding to skilled hands. In the rearview mirror, I could see the residence diminishing as I drove away, its windows shadowy and unwelcoming. But I was not vanishing into the darkness as they anticipated. I was merely shifting positions, ascending to elevated terrain, where I could view the entire field clearly. Time to show them what 45 years of expertise looked like when it ceased being appreciative. The Economy Lodge's neon sign blinked crimson against the obscurity as I entered the lot. The spot appeared exactly as it was, a roadside inn for wayfarers needing basic lodging without luxuries. 2 levels of matching doors, ice units humming at each end, and the constant odor of road fumes mixed with commercial cleansers. Ideal for someone needing to vanish briefly while plotting his next action. The reception attendant was perhaps 27, university-aged with fatigued eyes and the rehearsed detachment of someone on the evening shift. He scarcely glanced up from his periodical when I approached the counter. How many nights, he inquired, sliding a sign-up sheet across the coated surface. Just 1 for now, I responded, signing my name meticulously. We will see how it progresses from there. Room 131 was precisely what I had foreseen. A queen bed with a patterned cover that had seen superior decades, a small stand by the pane, and a washroom barely spacious enough to pivot in. The flooring showed wear paths from thousands of prior visitors, and the warmer clattered when it activated. But it was tidy, secluded, and $60 for the night. I had lodged in inferior spots during my plant years. I carried my containers inside one at a time, my back complaining after the extended day. The truck could remain loaded with the rest, no purpose unpacking what I would just repack. But I needed the necessities, attire for tomorrow, Evelyn's ornament case, and the binder of crucial papers I had rescued from the wreckage. The glaring washroom light was stark after the soft glow of avenue lamps. In the reflection, I appeared older than I had felt this morning. The day had etched new creases around my eyes, added burden to my shoulders, but my hands were firm, my thoughts lucid. That is what counted now. I placed Evelyn's ornament case and our marriage photo on the nightstand, forming a small altar of memory in this interim space. The fractured glass divided her grin in 2, but her eyes remained unaltered, radiant with the hope that had sustained us through 36 years of union. She had known how to love without stipulations, how to construct rather than demolish. I should have done this years ago, I told her image softly, should have perceived what they were doing before it advanced this far. But remorse was the indulgence I could not afford. Evelyn had passed believing Ethan was a decent man who would care for his aging father. I would not dishonor her memory by letting her trust prove baseless. The inn bed was solid but slim, nothing like the oversized mattress I had slept on for the past 7 years. Road noise seeped through thin partitions, vehicles slowing, automobiles accelerating toward far-off locations. Other visitors moving through their own fleeting existences, bearing their own troubles from one spot to another. I lay awake most of the night, not from unease, but from mental engagement. My mind was processing 7 years of gradual control, listing moments I had misinterpreted or overlooked. How many times had Brooke made subtle remarks about my age, my routines, my inconvenience? How often had Ethan aligned with her against me without speaking directly? The pattern was undeniable once I stopped excusing them. Every kindness I had displayed had been treated as duty. Every sacrifice had been accepted as my inherent obligation. They had conditioned me to be thankful for less and less until I was thankful just to exist in their area. But they had made one basic misjudgment. They had assumed dependency flowed only one way, that I needed them more than they needed me. They had forgotten that 7 years of loan installments created legal ties beyond kin emotion. They had ignored the documents they had endorsed when I helped them qualify for the financing. By 7 o'clock in the morning, I was fully attired and prepared to proceed. The rinse had been tepid at best, and the brew from the lobby device tasted like it had been prepared sometime last week. But discomfort was transient. What mattered was drive, advancing with intent instead of dwelling in self-compassion. I loaded my remaining belongings back into the truck and departed the reception. The same attendant was still there, appearing even more exhausted after his overnight duty. "Everything work out okay?" he asked routinely. "Better than anticipated," I replied, meaning it. The morning air was fresh and laden with potential. I had funds in the account, skills that remained valuable, and legal choices that Ethan and Brooke did not know existed. Most importantly, I had the benefit of being undervalued by people who thought they comprehended me entirely. Time to instruct them about their error. I started the truck and pulled onto the interstate, heading back toward Denver with the same resolve I had felt 40 years ago when I began my first genuine position. There was labor to be done, issues to resolve, and fairness to deliver. Ethan and Brooke had desired me out of their existences. They were about to learn that sometimes you receive precisely what you request. The directory felt slender in my hands as I hunted for lawyers who operated weekends. Michael Chang's notice stood out. Immigration and estate law. Urgent meetings available. His office line connected me to a weary but expert voice that indicated Saturday morning slots were feasible for pressing issues. "Mr. Chang, I need to urgently clarify estate ownership matters. There has been a kin dispute about a residence I have been occupying, and I need to understand my legal stance. Can you bring the pertinent records, loan papers, title, anything demonstrating your involvement in the estate?" I spread the papers I had rescued from the wreckage across the inn bed. Everything was there. Financing documents, estate tax receipts, coverage policies. 40 years of plant labor had taught me to maintain records, even when others managed the particulars. The drive to the city center took 25 minutes through calm Saturday morning avenues. Denver looked different from this viewpoint. Less like the metropolis where my son had betrayed me. More like a location where affairs were handled regardless of kin drama. Expert buildings stood prepared to solve problems for individuals willing to pay advisory fees. Chang's office occupied the 4th floor of a renovated stone structure near the Capitol. The reception area was compact, but neat, adorned with credentials and images of successful patrons. I was the sole individual there, clutching a folder that might hold my future. Michael Chang proved to be a sturdy man in his late 40s, attired in weekend relaxed garb, but upholding a professional manner. He motioned me into his workspace and accepted the folder with attentive detail. "Tell me about the circumstance first. Then we will examine the records." I explained the fundamentals without emotional addition. 7 years of loan installments, gradual decline of kin bonds, abrupt removal and lock alterations. Chang nodded sporadically, noting on a legal sheet. "Now, let us see what the paperwork reveals." He spread the documents across his desk systematically, scrutinizing each page with the methodical focus I recognized from my own labor habits. When he reached the original title and financing agreement, his brows lifted slightly. "Mr. Tinsley, according to these records, you are the only owner of the estate in question. The words lingered in the air like vapor from a soldering iron. What about the loan Ethan and Brooke reside there? They said I was aiding them in purchasing their residence. The financing was issued in your name solely. You qualified for the advance. You have made all the installments, and the estate tax records show you as the official proprietor. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal assertion to the residence whatsoever. Chang turned the title toward me, indicating the critical sections. My name appeared in all the essential places: debtor, proprietor, accountable party. Ethan and Brooke were absent in the legal phrasing that truly mattered, but they reside there. They have been treating it like their home for 7 years. Residing in an estate does not establish ownership. At best, they could be considered occupants, though I do not see any formal rental contract. Legally, you have every entitlement to reclaim your estate and remove any unauthorized dwellers. The contentment began in my chest and expanded outward like warmth from a satisfying meal. 7 years of being treated like a load. 7 years of having my generosity hurled back at me. 7 years of watching my son choose his spouse over his father. And all along they had been dwelling in my residence, consuming food I purchased, using services I paid for in a home they had no legal right to inhabit. What are my choices, I inquired, keeping my voice steady despite the mounting thrill. You could demand they depart immediately. You could initiate formal removal proceedings. You could sell the estate and compel them to relocate. As the legal proprietor, you have substantial influence in this situation. Chang reviewed the records once more, verifying details with expert thoroughness. The financing has been fully satisfied as of last month. You own the estate outright, valued approximately $420,000 in today's market. $420,000. I had been existing like a welfare case in my own $420,000 residence, thankful for the privilege of paying other people's expenses. The irony was so flawless, it nearly made me chuckle. I would like duplicates of everything that establishes my ownership, and I will need suggestions for a reliable agent. Chang promptly prepared copies while clarifying the legal safeguards of estate ownership. Within 90 minutes, I had documentation proving beyond doubt that Ethan and Brooke had been residing rent-free in my residence for 7 years. The spring morning felt altered as I walked back to my truck. Warmer, brighter, full of possibilities that had not existed 90 minutes earlier. I was not a destitute older man pleading for shelter. I was an estate owner who had been temporarily inconvenienced by intruders. Time to reclaim what was mine and show them the difference between benevolence and ownership. Harper Realty's lot was vacant except for one vehicle when I arrived that afternoon. Emily Harper turned out to be a keen-eyed woman in her early 40s who evidently worked weekends for clients earnest about transactions. Her grip was solid, her smile expert, and her queries direct. Mr. Tinsley, what timeline are we considering for your estate sale as swiftly as possible? I need the residence listed right away and presented to serious purchasers starting Monday. She accessed estate records on her device, nodding as information populated the display. This is a pleasant community, 3-bedroom ranch style, solid condition from the images I can view online. What is your asking range market worth? But the buyer must be prepared to occupy immediately. The current dwellers will need to relocate promptly. Emily's expression wavered slightly, probably pondering kin dynamics, but she sustained professional concentration. What about the current dwellers? Do they require time to locate new lodging? That is no longer my concern. They are adults. They will figure something out. The chill in my own voice surprised me, but it felt fitting. 7 years of concern for Ethan and Brooke's comfort had resulted in me being discarded like waste. Time to prioritize my own welfare for a change. We spent 90 minutes reviewing market trends, pricing approaches, and presentation timetables. Emily was competent and detailed, treating the transaction like any other business deal. By 5 o'clock, I had endorsed listing contracts and arranged for expert imaging Monday morning. I will have the estate on the system by Tuesday, Emily assured. Given the market and site, I anticipate serious attention within the first week. Perfect. By the time Ethan and Brooke realized what was transpiring, their lodging situation would already be beyond their command. The unit search required less effort than expected. The fourth complex I visited had a furnished studio available right away. Neat, fundamental, monthly lease for someone in shift. The overseer was pleased to hasten the request for a cash guarantee and initial month's payment. "How long will you be remaining?" she asked, while handling my credit verification. "Until my other lodging situation is settled. Could be a few weeks. Could be longer." By 7 o'clock, I was transferring my essential belongings from the inn to the unit. Not much to move. A few containers of attire, crucial papers, Evelyn's ornament case, and my tools. Everything else could linger in the truck until I decided what followed. The unit was nameless and interim, exactly what I required. Basic furnishings, working devices, wired television, and most importantly, a communication line for coordinating the residence sale. I called Emily from the unit line, verifying Monday's imaging session and Tuesday's listing start. "Miss Harper, I want you to know I will be journeying next week. The residence should be shown to any qualified purchasers, regardless of whether the current dwellers are cooperative." "That is understood, Mr. Tinsley. As the proprietor, you have full authority over showing timetables." The legal ownership felt more tangible each time someone acknowledged it professionally. For 7 years, I had existed like a visitor in my own residence. Now outsiders were treating me with the respect that estate ownership demanded. I spent the evening arranging my records and planning subsequent steps. The residence would be listed Tuesday. Presentations would commence immediately. Serious purchasers typically needed 2 to 4 weeks for funding and checks. Ethan and Brooke would probably uncover the sale sometime in the first week, depending on how rapidly news spread through the community. By then, I would be unreachable, and the process would be irreversible. I dialed Emily's number one more time before rest. "Miss Harper, one more detail. I will be away for a while, but you have my full permission to proceed with all facets of the sale. Accept any fair offer that meets our base price. I will keep you informed of all developments. Mr. Tinsley," but I would not be available for updates. That was the elegance of the scheme. By the time Ethan and Brooke realized their comfortable life was vanishing, I would be somewhere they could not reach to plead, menace, or control. The unit was quiet except for the buzz of the cooler and distant traffic sounds. Tomorrow I would enact the final stage of my strategy. For tonight, I could repose, knowing that justice was finally advancing. 7 years of taking me for granted was about to cost them everything they thought they possessed. Sunday morning found me at Denver Airport with a single carry bag and no specific endpoint in mind. The counter agent was assistive when I explained my circumstance. "I would like to reserve a flight somewhere sunny. Does not matter where as long as I can depart today." She checked openings while I stood there feeling lighter than I had in years. No timetable to uphold. No one anticipating me home. No kin duties to consider. Just an older man with reserves in the account and time to expend however he selected. There is a flight to Key West leaving in 4 hours. It is costly for last-minute reservation, but they have seats open. Perfect. Reserve it. Reserve. The airport procedure felt unfamiliar after years of remaining close to home. Security queues, boarding notices, the managed turmoil of people journeying to places that mattered to them. I had forgotten how thrilling movement could be when you chose it yourself instead of having it imposed on you. The attendant noticed my calm demeanor during entry. Vacation journey, she asked while verifying my seat. Something like that. Have not been somewhere sunny in years. Figured it was time to alter that. 4 hours later. I was stepping off a plane into Florida warmth that felt like a gift after Colorado's persistent spring chill. Key West Airport hummed with visitors and resort agents, everyone eager to start or conclude their temporary getaway from reality. The lodge transport driver spoke accented English, but flawless zeal. First time in Florida, sir. First time anywhere in a long time, I confessed, watching unfamiliar scenery past the windows. The retreat turned out to be exactly what someone escaping kin drama required. Nameless, comfortable, and completely separated from any duties back home. The reception clerk managed entry with cheerful competence. "How long will you be staying with us, Mr.?" Tinsley open-ended. "I will inform you when I am ready to depart." He handed me an access card and details packet about retreat features, pool assistance, shore entry, eateries, activities for guests desiring structured amusement. All of it accessible to someone who had just reclaimed control of his own life. My chamber faced the sea through sliding panels that opened onto a private deck. The sound of surf replaced the recollection of suburban quiet, and warm air carried hints of salt and lush plants instead of letdown and betrayal. I stood there for several minutes, letting the difference envelop me. The first task was deactivating my phone. Ethan and Brooke would eventually realize something was amiss when they could not contact me. But by then, the residence sale would be advancing, and my position would be irrelevant. Let them ponder where I had gone, and why I was not available to explain or bargain. Chamber service delivered midday meal to the deck. Fresh seafood, chilled ale, fruit that truly tasted like it had matured in sunlight. Simple delights that felt groundbreaking after months of eating solitary in my chamber, while my own kin treated me like an unwelcome lodger. The shore was filled with pairs and families enjoying breaks they had planned and saved for. I found a vacant chair under a shade and settled in with a volume I had acquired at the airport. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be and nothing to demonstrate to anyone. A attendant approached with the kind of care that funds and leisure demanded. "Another ale, sir, perhaps something from our mixed drink list." "Why not bring me something coastal? I am celebrating." "Celebrating what, if you do not mind my inquiring?" "Liberty," I said, meaning it fully. The afternoon melted into an agreeable blur of heat, spirits, and the fulfillment that comes from making choices without consulting anyone else's view. Other retreat guests moved through their own break patterns, but I was functioning on a different schedule entirely. By dusk, I was seated on my deck, watching the sunset color the sea in hues I had forgotten existed. The contrast with Friday night seated among refuse sacks on a suburban avenue was so thorough it felt like someone else's recollection. Tomorrow, Emily would begin imaging the residence for listing. By Tuesday, Ethan and Brooke would discover their comfortable setup was about to change forever. They would probably attempt calling me first, then panicking when they realized I was unreachable. But I would be here mastering relaxation again, while they mastered what consequences felt like. The surf kept advancing with rhythmic insistence, erasing whatever it met and beginning anew with each cycle. Sometimes that is exactly what life demanded. Complete removal of what preceded, followed by the endurance to build something superior. I raised my beverage to the deepening sky, toasting the end of being thankful for remnants, and the start of claiming what was rightfully mine. Monday morning in Key West arrived with ideal weather and chamber service brew that actually tasted like it had been made this era. I spent the early hours on my deck perusing a soft-cover mystery, while waves rolled endlessly onto pale sand below. Other retreat guests were initiating their vacation routines, pairs heading to morning meal, families arranging shore gear, groups planning trips to historic sites, all of them blissfully unaware that hundreds of miles north, a real-life drama was about to unfold. Around 11 o'clock local time, I decided to inspect my phone. The display erupted with alerts, 82 missed calls, 50 voicemails, and scores of text messages. The figures kept rising as new calls arrived, while I scrolled through the mayhem. Ethan's number appeared most often, but Brooke had added her portion of urgency to the digital mound. The initial few voicemails were perplexed but insistent. Ethan's voice strained with barely restrained fury. "Dad, call me back right now. There are people walking through our residence taking images. What the heck is happening?" Brooke, keener and more blaming. "Weston, I do not know what scheme you are executing, but you need to halt this immediately. Call us back." But as the hours advanced, the tone changed dramatically. Fury yielded to confusion, confusion to alarm, alarm to desperation. Ethan again. Hours later, "Dad, please, we cannot reach you anywhere. The agent says she is working for you. This cannot be lawful. Where are you?" Brooke, her voice fracturing. "Weston, this is our home. You cannot just sell our residence from under us. We have been calling everyone we know." I found Emily Harper's messages interspersed among the kin chaos. Professional reports delivered with business-like proficiency that contrasted sharply with the emotional collapse occurring elsewhere. Her message from this morning was particularly gratifying. "Mr. Tinsley, superb presentation yesterday. Young pair very intrigued. Mentioned they could finalize swiftly. They adore the community and envision raising kids there. We will keep you posted on progress. Perfect. New proprietors who would actually value the residence instead of treating it like a load they had inherited." The voicemails persisted throughout the day, each one more urgent than the previous. Ethan's voice declined from anger to imploring to something nearing genuine dread. "Dad, if you can hear this, we are sorry about how things proceeded. Maybe we can arrange something. Please just call us back so we can discuss." Brooke tried a different tactic, switching between control and outright pleading. "Weston, consider what you are doing. We have no place to go. Surely you do not want to make us destitute. You are not that harsh." But the most disclosing message came late in the afternoon. Ethan's voice scarcely maintaining composure. "Dad, I keep reflecting on that night when you returned from angling, the way Brooke spoke to you, the way I just stood there and permitted it. I know we erred, but selling the residence will not repair anything. Please, just call me back." Finally, some acknowledgement of consequences. Only after discovering they were not actually in command of their own lodging situation. I responded to Emily's messages with professional competence, authorizing extra presentations and affirming my interest in serious proposals. But the kin calls remained unanswered. They had made it clear a month ago that I was not required in their existences. Time for them to experience what not required actually resembled when the roles were inverted. The retreat lounge served excellent daiquiris with fresh citrus and salt that tasted like getaway instead of duty. I settled into a waterside chair with my phone muted, observing families relish their temporary haven, while mine disintegrated in ways they were only starting to comprehend. 7 years of loan installments had purchased me more than just legal ownership. They had acquired the entitlement to choose who deserved clarifications and who deserved quiet. Ethan and Brooke spent those 7 years teaching me that kin loyalty was conditional, that thankfulness had termination dates, and that affection could be discarded when it became bothersome. Well, they had been superb instructors. Time to show them how well I had absorbed their lessons. I extended my stay at the retreat for another week, notifying the reception that my plans had become more adaptable than originally expected. The afternoon extended ahead, with nothing more demanding than deciding whether to order seafood or poultry for supper. Back in Denver, the phone calls would persist. The alarm would heighten. The reality of their circumstance would penetrate with each unanswered tone. But that was their issue now, not mine. 4 weeks later, I returned to Denver with a bronze that spoke of prolonged leisure and a viewpoint that separation had sharpened. The flight from Key West landed on time, and the cab ride to my city center unit felt like visiting a different metropolis. The spring climate had warmed considerably, transforming the scenery from the dull uncertainty I had left to something nearing summer hope. Even the city center avenues looked more inviting, though that might have been the effect of no longer feeling confined by other people's anticipations. I was retrieving my valise from the cab rear when familiar voices called my name from across the lot. Ethan and Brooke approached like exiles from their own existences. 4 weeks of hunting had left visible traces. Ethan looked 15 pounds slimmer, his usual tidy appearance replaced by wrinkled attire and sunken eyes. Brooke's flawlessly maintained image had fractured, revealing someone who had endured too many restless nights facing repercussions she had never contemplated possible. Weston, finally. Brooke's voice carried relief blended with urgency. We have been searching everywhere for you. Ethan remained slightly behind his spouse, unable to meet my eyes directly. Dad, please. We need to discuss. Do not sell the residence. We can arrange something. I set my valise down carefully, noting how their voices had altered. A month ago, they had spoken to me with rejecting authority. Now they sounded like people imploring for something they could not afford to forfeit. Arrange what exactly? I kept my voice even. Professional. What is there to converse? We drove to every acquaintance you have ever mentioned, Brooke said, words tumbling together. Your former colleagues, that angling group, even Evelyn's sibling in Boulder. Nobody knew where you had gone. We were frantic. The word lingered between us like vapor. Frantic. A month ago, I had been the frantic one, seated among refuse sacks while they barred me from my own residence. The balance was almost artistic. Interesting selection of words. I picked up my valise handle. A month ago, you told me I was not required anymore. Remember, Ethan finally looked up, his face displaying the kind of remorse that only comes from watching comfortable presumptions crumble in real time. Dad, we made an error. Perhaps we spoke too hastily, acted too severely. Perhaps. The word emerged sharper than I intended. You tossed my belongings on the avenue like waste. You changed the locks on my own residence. You told me to vanish from your existences. And now you are surprised that I followed your counsel. Brooke tried one last control. Weston, you are harming us to harm us. This is not about fairness. It is about vengeance. Vengeance, I nearly laughed. Brooke, I am selling my residence which I own, which I paid for, which you have no legal claim to at all. How exactly is disposing of my own estate vengeance? The legal truth hit them like cold liquid. For 7 years they had existed, as if the residence belonged to them, as if my contributions were voluntary aid rather than a proprietor maintaining his own estate. They had convinced themselves that occupancy meant ownership, that dwelling somewhere created entitlements. We consulted with attorneys, Ethan said quietly. They informed us. They explained about the title, the loan papers. Then you comprehend the circumstance. I began walking toward the unit building entry. You are intruding in my residence. I am selling it. The new proprietors will decide whether they want occupants. They followed me across the lot, their urgency growing more evident with each step. 4 weeks of searching for someone who did not want to be located had apparently taught them the difference between command and reliance. Dad, we are kin. Ethan's voice cracked on the last word. I stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Kin. A month ago, you stood there while your spouse told me I was not required anymore. You watched her discard me like waste, and you said nothing. You chose her over me, Ethan. That was your decision to make, and you made it. We can pay rent, Brooke interjected urgently. Whatever the new proprietors want, we will pay it. That is between you and them, I replied, resuming my walk toward the building. I will provide them your contact if they are interested in occupants. The unit building foyer felt like refuge after 4 weeks of sea views, but for different reasons. This was temporary cover, but it was cover I had chosen, paid for with my own funds, free from the duties and grudges that had tainted the residence they still considered home. They continued speaking behind me, their voices merging into an urgent chorus of assurances they should have made a month ago. But assurances offered under pressure were not worth much. They had shown me their true sentiments when they thought I had no power to resist. Now that the power had shifted, their sudden valuation felt exactly as genuine as it truly was. The lift doors closed on their continuing pleas, but I could still hear their voices echoing in the foyer as I ascended to the 5th floor. My unit felt exactly as I had left it, temporary but tranquil, free from the built-up grudges that had made the residence feel like a confinement. I unpacked methodically, hanging vacation attire that smelled like ocean air and possibility instead of duty and disappointment. When Ethan and Brooke knocked on my door 25 minutes later, I was prepared for them. The sale finalizes tomorrow. I said through the security chain, you have 1 week to pack your belongings and vacate the estate. After that, you will need to discuss lodging arrangements with the new proprietors. Dad, we are your kin. Ethan's voice was fracturing completely now. Kin. I opened the door wider so they could see my face clearly. A month ago, you discarded me like waste. You told me I was not required. You changed the locks on my own residence. Remember those exact words. Brooke, take your clutter and leave. Brooke tried one last manipulation. We can pay rent to the new proprietors. We have solid credit, steady earnings. That is not my concern anymore. I began closing the door. You desired me out of your existences. Congratulations. You received exactly what you requested. Please. Ethan placed his hand against the doorframe. We will do anything. We can alter. You had 7 years to alter. 7 years to show thankfulness instead of entitlement. 7 years to treat me like kin instead of a convenient cash dispenser. I stepped back from the door. The new proprietors are a young pair with offspring. They will actually appreciate the residence instead of treating it like something they are entitled to. The door closed with a soft snap, severing their final attempts at negotiation. I spent Tuesday morning at the title firm signing papers that transferred ownership from myself to Ryan and Sophia Bennett, newly married who had adored the residence and planned to nurture their kin there. They were everything Ethan and Brooke were not: thankful, enthusiastic, financially accountable, and genuinely thrilled about home possession. Thank you for accepting our proposal so swiftly, Sophia said as we completed the paperwork. We know others were interested. You reminded me why residences exist, I replied. They are for families who want to build something together, not for people who take blessings for granted. The payment for $450,000 felt surprisingly light in my hands. Figures on paper representing 40 years of labor, 7 years of loan installments, and 1 month of learning that kin loyalty was not always mutual. But it also represented liberty. Liberty from ungrateful relatives. Liberty from living situations based on guilt rather than esteem. Liberty to choose how I spent my remaining years without considering other people's convenience. Emily Harper handled the final particulars with professional competence. The new proprietors take possession Friday morning. I assume the current dwellers will be ready to depart. That is not my responsibility anymore, I said, meaning it fully. By Thursday, I had terminated my city center unit lease and loaded my truck with everything I actually needed. The rest, furnishings, household objects, accumulated items from a life that no longer existed, went to charity. Evelyn would have approved of the simplicity. Friday morning found me driving east toward Lake Placid, where water views and hill air promised the kind of peace that came from selecting your own neighbors, instead of being stuck with relatives who confused closeness with loyalty. The radio played vintage folk tunes as I drove through shifting scenery, each mile placing more distance between myself and 7 years of being taken for granted. In my rearview mirror, Denver diminished to highway viewpoint, just another metropolis where someone had learned the difference between benevolence and ownership. Ethan and Brooke would resolve their lodging situation eventually. Perhaps the new proprietors would lease to them. Perhaps they would find elsewhere. Either way, they would confront their future without the safety net they had spent 7 years assuming would always support them. Justice did not require harshness, just repercussions. They had taught me that kin was conditional, that thankfulness had limits, that affection could be discarded when it became inconvenient. I had proven to be an excellent learner. The interstate extended ahead like possibility itself, leading toward a life where appreciation would not be taken for granted, and kin would mean something deeper than convenient duty. Sometimes the best vengeance was simply allowing people to experience the natural outcomes of their own choices. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more tales like this. Share your impressions in the comments below. What did you think of Weston's journey? Did it remind you of any real-life experiences? Feel free to ask questions too. We love exchanging ideas and discussing the themes together. Your interactions help build our community. For the next story, just click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching and being part of this.